All right, welcome everybody to today's ETAS update for the summer term 2021. I'm here with Executive Director Mike Furlow and Jessica Rohr, our Member Engagement and Communications Specialist. Before we get started, I am going to do a little housekeeping. We're asking everybody to keep their video and microphones off while we're presentation here, but since we don't have very many people signed up for this session, when we get to the Q&A, feel free to unmute your microphone and turn your camera on to ask questions aloud, or feel free to type them in the chat, whichever is more comfortable for you. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Jessica to get us started.
Great, thanks, Melissa. So today we're going to be going over a couple different things about ETAS. We're going to look back a bit. Mike's got some actually really cool numbers and updates that I think we haven't shared in a while, so that's new and exciting. And then we're going to look ahead at what's next in terms of assessing ETAS at your own institutions. There are a lot of different scenarios that we've heard of, a lot of different conditions on different campuses and in different libraries. So we're going to be talking through the factors that we'll be considering as we look at eligibility for ETAS coming this fall. We've left plenty of time for questions, so if you have them, as Melissa said, you'll be able to just unmute yourself and we will have a conversation. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike to talk through more details.
Okay, thanks a lot, Jessica and Melissa, and thanks to all of you for joining us this afternoon or this morning or this evening, depending upon your time zone. I wanted to start off this part of the presentation by reminding us about what ETAS is and how it came to be. I don't think we need to belabor this, but remember that emergency access, we want to emphasize here, the intention is to serve in an emergency, and that the way we serve is meant to be temporary, right? That the idea is that what we are doing here is providing something that can support you in service continuity when you're suffering from some kind of unexpected or temporary disruption to your normal operations. Perhaps you've had to close your buildings, or perhaps you've had to close stacks, or perhaps there's been a natural disaster in the area and you have to take precautions, and among those are, keeping certain facilities unavailable. All of those are situations that could come up. Oh, and also maybe a pandemic. So, the idea is that this is intended to support you when you have a need, and that it will end when your need is no longer there for you. And for many of you, we are reaching that point where the need for ETAS has dissipated, which is great. But I'm assuming that if you're here this afternoon, it's because there's at least a chance you think that your university or your college might need to rely upon ETAS for a little bit longer. So we'll talk about that. On the next slide, I did want to share with you a few things that I've observed recently about our provision of emergency access since last spring. Over that period of time, we've had over 200 universities and colleges take advantage of the service for at least a period of time. They are international. They include many libraries in Canada, mostly in the US, but many in Canada. We've also in the United Kingdom and also Lebanon. We've seen new members join HathiTrust as a result of this. And the response for ETAS has been really tremendous. Many people are using it. You can see some numbers here on the screen that tells a bit of that story. Over time, what we've seen is that emergency access usage seems to account for at least a quarter or more of our usage and views on any given day. And because we've had to offer this, we call it temporary, but because we've had to offer it for almost 18 months now, it has given us an opportunity to learn some things. And what we have learned has driven improvements in various aspects of HathiTrust services that are going to stand us in good stead beyond the pandemic. So for example, we have been making significant changes to our user interfaces and are on the verge of releasing a major new improvement to our book reading interface in the coming months. The quality of the data we use to deliver ETAS has improved because many libraries have been submitting and cleaning and refining metadata to us about their and sharing it with us about their holdings, and that's resulted in more accurate matches. And then overall, we've invested in infrastructure for delivery of content on the HathiTrust digital library, and that will increase service responsiveness going into the future. Where we are today on the next slide is for the first time this week since really April 2020, we have fewer institutions using emergency access than those that are. We have just under half of all the institutions that have ever used ETAS using it right now. And we have several that have notified us they plan to deactivate between now and the end of August. Usage is still remaining high where it's available, but it's definitely showing signs of decrease as fewer institutions are using emergency access. Now, on the next slide, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about your plans for the fall. Well, first, our plans for the fall. As I said, I think if you're here, it's because you're trying to figure out what you're going to do this fall, how you're going to reopen, in what ways can you reopen, and what kinds of services are you going to need to provide. If you're in the middle of planning for a fall semester and restaffing your spaces and your public services right now, I understand you're going through an awful lot. It is a tremendously challenging set of issues that you're trying to navigate. You're managing, you have to manage the expectations of many different people and navigate differing expectations, right? And among your staff, your users, and so forth. And so it's tremendously challenging to do this work right now. It's harder than it was to go home. So I wanted to reassure you, though, that we will continue to provide emergency access if it is needed to those libraries that continue to have a need to disrupt normal collection access services because of the pandemic. I don't think we're going to have anywhere near the numbers this fall using it than we've had in the past. I think we could have a handful in the United States and Canada by the end of the year. We will see. It depends upon a lot of different factors. But going into the fall, for any libraries that are continuing or wish to continue to provide emergency access services to their users, we will be asking you to document your plans. Jessica will say more about that in just a second. And I also wanted to tell you that as we continue to offer this service, we're not changing any of our terms of service. The rules of the game will remain the same as we go into the fall term. I did want to talk with you a little bit about a particular set of questions that you're probably trying to think through as you form these plans for the fall. And what I want to, kind of emphasize here is that I expect that what you're mostly trying to answer is how can you meet your users' needs while keeping your staff and your users safe and keeping with your local guidelines. Even when it comes to emergency access, that should be the primary question you're asking. We have sometimes in the past gotten questions that really more lead with, what do we need to do to keep emergency access? And I think that is sometimes a valid question to ask, but that shouldn't be the primary governing question you're asking to try to plan your fall. There are many scenarios, as we've seen over the last year, that can allow for partial resumption of library services and still continue with emergency access services, where it might be necessary or you might be able to provide some limited forms of print delivery, whether curbside or mail or whatever. But at the same time, it's safer for you if you don't have folks coming into the stacks and you can limit the amount of books you have to handle. And in those cases, emergency access has been a godsend, I think, for some folks. But at that point, if you're open, you've got some limited collection services, yeah, you do need to be thinking about making sure you stay within the boundaries of our terms of service and thinking about what do we need to do to make sure we don't run afoul of that. But really, for everybody, your guiding question should be, what's the situation on the ground and how do we respond to it? And once you have a clearer sense of that, then we can talk a little bit about whether or not that situation qualifies for emergency access. I also want to emphasize here on this next slide, one particular detail about our terms of service, and I want to talk about it for a little bit longer than I might ordinarily. This is the one part of our terms of service that probably gets talked about the most. It's the one that certainly gets complained about the most. And it is that if a book is, rather put it another way, if you have emergency access operating, you're not supposed to be lending any books that are in HathiTrust at that time. You might be lending books that are not in HathiTrust, but we've asked you all to restrict lending of books that are available via ETAS. And part of the reason for doing that is that if you're able to lend any book in your collection largely without restriction, then it's quite likely you're really providing normal collection access. And that's not the kind of situation that we designed ETAS for. So if you're delivering books curbside, mail delivery, interlibrary loan, we have to ask you not to circulate emergency access titles. But I want to emphasize here why. This is not just a random, willful kind of rule here. When we started emergency access, we really carefully looked at fair use laws. And we carefully thought through what are the scenarios under which it's lawful for us to provide access to in copyright works. And in our reading and in our analysis, we understood best that we could best stay within fair use guidelines if we maintained a rule of one copy, one user. So the digital copy is essentially substituting for the print copy on your shelf while our ETAS is active. If we were able to provide a digital copy and a print copy at the same time, we're effectively duplicating the book and duplicating the number of copies available. And in fact, potentially making it impossible, or rather unlikely, that the publisher would get a sale from the book. So we're trying not to interfere with the commercial market while providing these services. So that's why we've insisted on one user, one copy. Sometimes it's really important to kind of deal with that question when the user is complaining about it. And I just want to provide you with additional context for why that rule is in place. Now, I've talked for a while, and I think I'm going to let Jessica pick it up from here, talk about continuation assessment and some factors there. I'll come back for questions shortly.
Okay, great. Thanks, Mike. So down to some of the logistics here. As Mike said, we're doing an assessment regularly for all schools that are continuing, all libraries that are continuing to use ETAS. And we're doing that not to police your activities or to be kind of the bad cop here, but we really want to make sure that we can continue providing the service as long as libraries need it due to the global health pandemic. So the assessment really is looking at how disrupted is access to your print collection, to your campus, to your library. And I'll be looking at that in a bit more detail here. But just so you know, we're not trying to be too big brother about this, but we do want to make sure that we can keep offering the service as long as our members need it. So the continuation assessment coming up will start in August. The ETAS contact at your library will receive a message, an invitation to complete an assessment form. And we'll be doing that for about a month. We ask people to submit those. We will be assessing them on a rolling basis. So once it's submitted, it'll be just a couple days and we'll get back to you, with a determination. We will continue to do these assessments regularly as long as we continue to offer the service to member libraries. So if you continue to use it in the fall, expect another round of assessments at some point. Next slide, please. As Mike has been talking about, and as I've said many, many times before, if you've been to these in the past, what we're doing in the assessment really is trying to make sure that we're answering one primary question. So is there continued disruption in access to your library's print collection based on this emergency, which in this case is the global pandemic? So in answering that question, we're looking at three primary factors: disruption to your campus in terms of access, disruption to your library, and also disruption to print collections on your campus. So there's a lot of different ways that this plays out in terms of scenarios and different conditions. And so I'm going to talk about those in a bit more detail here. Next slide, please. So in considering what are you needing to do to protect the health and safety of your campus community, certainly one of the main questions that people are asking is, what do we need to do in terms of campus restriction? So this is where you may have groups who are going to be teaching remotely, are not attending class in person, but doing so remotely. So this particular factor is just looking at what kinds of restrictions are there across the board at the campus level in terms of coming to campus. Next slide. The next factor that we're looking at is restricted library access. So this is where we get a little bit more specific in terms of number of patrons in the building, number of staff. Will there be a reduction in hours? Will there be actual continued library closures? So any ways that you may be having to adjust your normal operations to account for the global health pandemic, those are factors that we're considering in terms of library access. So again, just keep in mind that our primary question is there a continued disruption in normal operations to your campus and your print collection due to the global health pandemic? So This is another one. People are getting creative too. So we've heard scenarios that are outside of these listed here. And that's again, what you'll be able to tell us about in the assessment coming up. Next slide, please. And this gets even more granular. This is about restrictions on your print collection. So again, there have been a lot of creative ways that people are putting in place to protect the health and safety of their patrons. Lots of different things you can do in the stacks in terms of circulation, in terms of mediating access to titles. And this is where it really comes into play with the one-to-one principle that Mike was talking about. So again, it's really ensuring that there isn't duplicate circulation of a print title as well as a digital title available in the emergency temporary access service. So we do ask you to give us some updated plans on your print collection access coming up this fall. All right. There are a couple more factors to keep in mind if you are at a library that's part of a state system. We've got 5, 6 state systems. Several of them have already decided that they won't need to be using ETAS in the fall, but we do still have other campuses that are using ETAS and maybe making some decisions. So in the instance of one campus deciding to discontinue ETAS and another campus that's going to continue using it, that's where we need to start thinking about 2 different factors. One being, how do users on those campuses get access to resources? In terms of authentication, we've got to take a look at how people are accessing titles. And the other piece to keep in mind that gets a little tricky sometimes with state systems is that if there's a school that is using ETAS, the normal terms of service apply. Those titles may not circulate. And that is true in terms of circulating to the campuses who are not using ETAS. So if you are at a campus that has discontinued the use of ETAS, you may not lend titles to those campuses that are no longer using ETAS. So, or excuse me, that are using ETAS. So it's just the same concept, one-to-one, print, digital copy, same terms of service apply, but you just have to think a little bit more about how many campuses are still active with ETAS within your state system. So a couple campuses are in that situation, and we can work with you on those details. Next slide. Couple really basic questions here. What if you just want to deactivate right now? You can do that. You can send us a message. We can deactivate ETAS for your library. Or if you have already made some plans and you have a future date at which you would like to deactivate ETAS, you can send us that and make that request as well. Certainly, you know, if you already know that on August 15th, your library is going to resume normal operations, you can let us know and we'll work with you on scheduling that. You're not sure if you still qualify. You're making a lot of changes and you're not sure which of those particular factors might be at play in terms of determining your eligibility. That's where we are encouraging you to submit the assessment form. You can request it at the feedback@issues.hathitrust.org email address, and we'll get that started. And then if you are already thinking about, well, we can deactivate ETAS right now, but who knows what it's going to be like in 2 weeks or in a month, you will be able to submit a request to reactivate ETAS in the future, should you need that. Next slide, please. So if you are preparing to deactivate ETAS on your campus or think you might be doing so, we do want to help you prepare to communicate that change to your campus. So as Mike said, it's been a while. There's certainly users on your campus, faculty, staff, researchers who have come to rely upon this access to do their teaching, learning, and research. And just giving them a heads up as best as you're able to can definitely help them prepare and make other arrangements. So we've created some materials that are available on the website to help make that easier for you to communicate. And certainly when you do deactivate ETAS, continue to use HathiTrust and promote HathiTrust as a resource. There's still a lot in there that are going to be useful for your campus community going forward. Next slide, please. So next steps, Check with the ETAS contact at your library if you are not that individual. They'll be the ones receiving communications going forward about the assessment process. We will start that in August, the week of August 2nd. And if you are currently using ETAS, this is a requirement. We are asking everyone who is currently using ETAS to submit this assessment. You can, in that time period, if you know that you've got a date that you want to deactivate ETAS, you can let us know. That could be even after September 1st. So, if you know that it's going to be October, just let us know. As long as the assessment is complete by September 1st, you can have a deactivation date in the future. So we'll get back to you, as I said, in a couple of days at that time, let you know if eligibility for the service continues for your library, and then you won't have to think about it again for a while. So once you've got that determination in place, you can carry on, and we'll let you know when the next assessment period is. And next slide. This is it. This is us. This is where I think we're able to answer any questions that you've got, unless Mike, you've got something else to add.
No, I'm happy to go to questions at this point.
Okay.
And I think, as we said, we'll break from usual practice, since there's only a handful of folks here. If you want to open up your microphone to ask the question, or raise your hand if you've been acclimated to that process, either way.
Yeah, Susan, absolutely. We will be sending a copy of these slides out. Definitely, we understand that this may be information you want to share with others in your library, so you'll get those for sure.
And we'll be posting this recording to the recording of this session to our YouTube channel, and we can share a link to that for you as well.
There is another question in the chat about deactivation. Can it be done over a weekend, or does it need to be requested for a business day? We would strongly prefer that it's requested for a business day. We are not usually in the office on Saturday and Sunday to do deactivations. That said, we can schedule it to happen pretty early in a day to get it done. And if something happens so that you start opening your doors at 8 a.m. and everything's back to normal, but we don't get to deactivation until around 9, that's going to be okay too, at least for us. So, but yeah, we would much prefer
some on weekends.
Yeah, it's generally preferable, but yeah. So Jeff Carroll has another question. Our understanding is the ETAS materials can be used on site within the library, no checkout, no circ. Is this correct? So this is one of those gray areas, and I think the way we've treated this is, yeah, definitely circulation is off the table, right? We really don't believe that circulation is consistent with our fair use reading. We know, however, that it's kind of impossible in some situations to completely restrict stacks. In some cases, the way buildings are constructed, the architecture does not permit it. In other cases, there might be other situations to deal with there. And we've kind of viewed in-house usage as generally incidental and not significant enough to warrant to be read as a violation of fair use. We try not to encourage it, but we understand it will likely happen from time to time, and know that we can't and shouldn't really be in the business of trying to police every possible person who wants to use a book. So. Another question. I'm sorry, Melissa, you usually ask questions. I just have it open here, so I'm zooming right on in there.
I can actually answer this one. So we're better. So we're better off requesting the day we open, not the Friday before. I usually come in by 8:30 in the morning. So if you want it turned off in the morning, I can tell you I can turn it off by 8:30 in the morning. If you want it turned off that day, you can. I would say when you request it, I would say request it right now so we can schedule it. So I put it on my calendar. Hey, deactivate this institution at 8:30 a.m. that day. That would be helpful for us instead of waiting to send us the email and telling us we need to turn it off right away. If you want to request us to turn it off the Friday before, some people have asked us to turn it off the day before the library opens. That's up to you, what you want to do.
I think following on that too, Melissa, is that, certainly the technical apparatus for doing so is right there, and we can do it quickly as needed. I think the piece to keep in mind as you're planning is just thinking about some headway to alert your community to the change. As mentioned, there have been a lot of folks who've come to rely on this, and giving them some advance notice could be helpful. Certainly create less of a headache for you in case there are complaints. And I know for some libraries have really promoted HathiTrust, and they've got links, and they've got, a lot of materials that they may need to remove from prominent promotion areas. So just, flip side of that is that you might just want to consider a little more heads up if you can.
Yeah, and I think Maggie elaborates there that there's certainly issues that IT folks need to figure out to undo the work of integrating HathiTrust into the catalog for ETAS. So certainly, figure out what time you need and take that, and we'll help as far as we can with that.
Yeah, so for if University of California, Irvine, or any schools, if you know that you are planning to deactivate mid-September, then I would say that's what you want to put in your assessment form when you submit. If you email us and we've got you already scheduled, or if you email us now and say we're going to deactivate on September 15th, then no, you don't need to fill out an assessment form because we've already got you scheduled for deactivation. But if in August you have not scheduled for deactivation, that would be the time to let us know. Certainly, and then we wouldn't really do an assessment. We would just schedule you for a deactivation.
That is a good point, Melissa, too, that I think I'll want to clarify going forward with all the ETAS contacts, is that if you have already scheduled a date in advance for deactivation, I won't bug you to complete an assessment form when that starts in August. So we'll make sure that we're really looking carefully at those requested deactivation dates before we start asking people to do an assessment that they really wouldn't need to do.
Oh, Susan, you've got a question?
Yeah, hi, thanks for this overview. This has been really helpful as we've tried to sort out what we need to do with the ETAS. I'm from Johns Hopkins, and we're talking about probably needing to stop it in September. In talking about with our IT folks, because we have links in our public display for the ETAS, and also preventing the books from circulating or being a part of our curbside pickup. If we go ahead and schedule the shutoff date, it's better to probably have them remove those links, or how do we coordinate that on the end so that we're not kind of running into problems where we accidentally have a book that's no longer tagged as being an ETAS book? Like, how do we coordinate that with the deactivation of this whole program, I guess, is the question.
Yeah, I think I understand the question, right? You've got it may take time. What I'm hearing is that it may take time for you to kind of unwind the process of getting, pointing to books in your catalog, or the point to HathiTrust for certain titles in your catalog, or ensuring these things don't get into other systems. And so, I think the thing to keep in mind is once we turn it off, it is off, right? And what will happen when we turn it off is any links that are pointing to those titles will no longer work, right? They'll work. They'll just say you can't see this, and so I think that it is a little bit tricky. And if you feel like you need to, I mean, I would say we can be flexible with this. And if you feel like you need to, deactivate a day after you've confirmed all of that is unwound, that's great. We still need advance notice though, so we'd like to make sure we stay in sync with your timelines on this. In some ways, I feel like it might be, if I were me, and I'm not, there's no reason you should take my advice, I would probably want that material not, to delink from the catalog and so forth before we deactivate it. So that then there's not going to be that challenge of users having disappointment when they try to go to an active book. Does that help the question, Susan?
Yeah, that is helpful. I definitely we're going to work on rewinding things because we're already looking at that already. So I'm just trying to, what we're not clear on, I guess, is the timeline. But it sounds like once we notify you, like once we've decided the date, which will be ahead of September, I think, that we would notify. How long does it? I guess that's not what I'm not clear on. Is like how long does the deactivation process take on your end? Like if I tell our IT people, like, okay, we've got like 2 weeks to make sure that we get all these tags out of the catalog and everything. Like on your end, is it just like overnight? That they
It's flipping a switch. It's
Okay.
really instant. There's a place we go and we flip the switch and then it's off. So it doesn't take very long on our end to turn it off.
Okay, good. That's very helpful. Thank you.
Imagine a big red button that says stop on it.
I think too, Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but I just want to clarify that if there were links, still active links in your catalog, they wouldn't be broken links. They would still go to the HathiTrust catalog, and it would just, instead of, saying, hey, you can read this because it's temporary access, it'll say, wah, wah, nope, this is in copyright.
Yeah, that's correct. And I misspoke a second ago. What won't work is the ability to read the book, right? So it'll tell whereas before it would have said this book is available for temporary viewing. It's going to tell you this book is not available for viewing at that point. So.
These are great questions and actually really, really helpful, I think, to help make sure we're communicating as well as we can going forward. We know that circumstances have changed a lot, and trying to reflect that as we're sharing information is really useful. So thanks for your good questions.
I have one more question.
Yes, please.
Is the ETAS contact the same person that gets the ETAS or the HathiTrust emails about that, or does it just depend at the institution?
It should be the same person. So we have a list of everyone who we've been working with from a library that has determined themselves or has been determined to be the ETAS contact. But Susan, if that is not you, I can definitely let you know who it is. Have you been receiving that?
I've been getting them from Winston. I think it's probably Winston Tab. I'm not positive though.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So
why
don't I just
know. He might need help with filling out the assessment, so we can try to work that out with him. But I guess we can send it to the email. So as long as we get a copy of the assessment from him, we can help him fill out the answers for it.
Susan, would it be easier to add you also as an ETAS contact, so you would be getting those emails as well?
Yeah, that would be great, actually.
Yeah, we could, because we certainly
can do that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Looks like Maggie wants us to take a peek at the deactivation slide again.
Well, I can go back to that.
And we will be sending these out, but I understand the need to take notes on your own.
Oh, here we go.
Maybe that's.
Everything here is also linked on the ETAS deactivation resources on our website.
A few libraries have also asked if we could provide lists of super users so they could really get the information into the hands of people, and that is just not something that we're able to do. So we'll be relying on folks to spread the word widely, pass it on.
Any other questions for us? If not, we can probably wrap this up. Any final words that you want to offer, Jessica?
No, just thanks for coming and all the great questions.
Yeah, no, thanks to everybody. These questions actually helped us think a little bit about how we present this information too. So the next version of this will probably anticipate some of your questions. And if you continue to have things you want to check in about, outside of a full assessment, certainly feel free to continue to write us. The best avenue is to write to feedback@issues.hathitrust.org. Thanks
Great.
to you all for coming, and thanks for supporting HathiTrust.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.